The official report says my team died in a cave-in. It says a sudden, unpredictable seismic event trapped them thousands of feet below the Balkan Mountains. It calls me the sole survivor, a man broken by tragedy and trauma. That's a lie. I'm not broken. I'm haunted. And they weren't killed by falling rocks. They were taken by something else, something that has been waiting in the dark for millennia. I'm telling the real story here for the first time, because the truth is infinitely more terrifying than the official lie, and it needs to be heard. This is a new channel with unbelievable stories every day. Subscribe so you don't miss the next one. My name is Dr. Aris Thorne, or at least it was. Now I'm just Aris, a 42-year-old man who spends too much time looking at shadows and listening to the silence between sounds. I was a geologist, a tenured professor with a respectable career, but my real passion, the thing that got me laughed out of faculty lounges and academic conferences, was what my colleagues called fringe science. I believed that far beneath the Earth's crust, in the vast, unexplored cave networks, a civilization could have evolved. Not mole men or lizard people from some pulp fantasy, but a genuine, intelligent human offshoot, adapted to a world without a sun. I wrote papers on the theoretical biology, the potential energy sources like chemiluminescence and geothermal vents. I was called a dreamer, a fantasist. My life's work was a joke. This expedition was supposed to change all of that. It was my last chance to prove I wasn't crazy. It all started with a satellite anomaly. Ground-penetrating radar, meant to be mapping aquifers in the Dinaric Alps, detected a void. A massive, impossibly deep void that didn't match any known geological models. The Kárstova Abyss, they dubbed it. While other geologists saw a data error, I saw a doorway. It took me 2 years of relentless lobbying, cashing in every favor, and sinking my own life savings into the project to get the expedition funded. I assembled a small, elite team. There was Dr. Lena Petrova, a brilliant but ruthlessly pragmatic astrobiologist. She didn't believe a word of my theories, but the chance to study extremophile life in a unique environment was too tempting for her to pass up. She was my scientific rival, and my fiercest critic, her sharp intellect, a constant challenge to my own. Then there was Ben Carter, my graduate student, a 24-year-old with a mind like a sponge and an optimism that bordered on naive. He saw the world with a sense of wonder I thought I had lost long ago. He believed in my work, and more importantly, he believed in me. The three of us were the core. Supported by a small surface crew, we were going to be the first humans to enter the Kárstova Abyss. The descent was exhilarating. For the first 1,000 feet, it was standard spelunking. Damp limestone, the familiar drip of water, the scent of wet earth. But then, it changed. The rock walls became smoother, almost polished, and were veined with a crystalline substance that faintly glowed when our headlamps hit it. Lena was immediately fascinated, taking samples and muttering about piezoelectric properties she'd never encountered.
The pressure at this depth should have pulverized this formation, Aris,
she said, her voice a mix of skepticism and excitement in my comms.
This is anomalous.
I just smiled. Anomalous was exactly what I was looking for. We repelled deeper, into a cavern so vast our lights couldn't find the walls. We were just 3 tiny specks of light hanging in an infinite, silent black. The silence itself was a physical presence. It pressed in on you, deadened sound, made your own heartbeat feel like a drum. That's when we saw it. Far below us, a faint, pulsing blue-green light. It wasn't the uniform glow of a gas or a mineral deposit. It was arranged in patterns. Lines, spirals, and concentric circles spread across the cavern floor like a ghostly city seen from the air. Ben was breathless.
Doctor, what is that?
I didn't have an answer, but a wild, triumphant hope was roaring in my chest.
That, Ben,
I said, my voice shaking slightly,
is why we're here.
We continued our descent, landing on a floor of smooth, dark rock. The light was coming from a species of lichen, a bioluminescent fungus that grew in impossibly perfect geometric shapes. Lena was on her knees instantly, her scientific curiosity overriding any fear.
This isn't natural,
she whispered, running a gloved finger over a glowing spiral.
The distribution is too perfect. It's cultivated, like a garden.
I knelt beside her, my heart pounding against my ribs. It was the first piece of evidence, the first sign that something other than blind nature was at work down here. We were standing in a park or a plaza, tended by hands that had never seen the sun. For the first time, Lena looked at me not with pity or professional rivalry, but with a flicker of awe.
Okay, Thorne,
She said.
you have my attention.
We spent the next 3 days exploring that first great cavern, which we named the Glow Garden. The air was surprisingly breathable, rich in oxygen with a strange metallic tang. Lena's analysis showed that the lichen was photosynthesizing but not with light. It was using the ambient geothermal energy and rare earth minerals in the rock to create a complex chemosynthetic reaction. It was a self-sustaining ecosystem, a biological engine running in total darkness. As we pushed deeper into the network of tunnels leading from the garden, the first real twist occurred. Ben, scouting a narrow passage ahead, called out to us over the radio, his voice cracking with excitement.
You guys need to see this. Now.
We found him standing before a wall, his headlamp pointed at a section of rock that was different from the rest. It was darker, smoother, and embedded within it was an object. It was a tool, unmistakably. It was shaped like a hand axe or a chisel, but it wasn't made of flint or obsidian. It was a metallic alloy, cool to the touch, impossibly light, and with an edge that was still sharp enough to shave with. No corrosion, no patina of age. It looked like it had been left there yesterday. Lena ran her scanner over it, her eyes wide as she read the display.
This alloy, it's not on the periodic table. The base elements are known, but the way they're bonded, it's impossible. It would require pressures and temperatures we can barely replicate in a lab.
The tool was just the beginning. The walls of the tunnel it came from were not natural, they were carved. Faintly at first, then with increasing clarity and artistry, we found reliefs and etchings covering every surface. They told a story. They depicted a people, tall and slender, with large, unlidded eyes and elongated limbs. We called them the Chthonians, the dwellers of the deep. The carvings showed them cultivating the glowing lichen, building structures that seemed to grow out of the rock itself, and harnessing geothermal vents for energy. It was a complete, complex society. They weren't primitive cavemen. They were engineers, artists, biologists. They were a civilization as rich and complex as any on the surface. For weeks, we were like children in the world's greatest museum. We documented everything, every carving, every artifact we found. We felt like titans, on the cusp of the single greatest discovery in human history. The ridicule, the doubt, the years of being called a crank, it was all about to be washed away in a flood of irrefutable proof. But as we went deeper, the atmosphere began to change. The triumphant feeling started to curdle into something else, unease. It started with the sounds. A low, intermittent hum that seemed to come from the rock itself. It wasn't geological, we checked. It wasn't our equipment. It was a deep, resonant frequency that you felt in your bones more than you heard with your ears. It would come and go without warning, and every time it did, a cold dread would wash over me. Ben started having nightmares. Lena became withdrawn and irritable. Our equipment began to glitch. The compasses would spin wildly, and the radio would hiss with static whenever the hum started. We were over a mile deep, completely cut off from the surface. The initial wonder was being replaced by a creeping, claustrophobic paranoia. The tension between Lena and me came to a head in a tunnel, filled with some of the most detailed carvings yet. They showed the Chthonians in what looked like a religious ceremony, gathered around a massive geode that pulsed with internal light. "We need to turn back, Aris," she said, her voice tight.
We're low on a few specific battery types for the deep-range scanner. The comms are unreliable, and that humming sound is getting more frequent. Our mission was to document extremophile life, which we've done. This is beyond our scope. It's reckless.
I turned on her, my own frustration boiling over. "Reckless? We are standing in the middle of a lost world, Lena. We are about to rewrite every history book ever written. You want to turn back now because of a few dead batteries and a funny noise?"
A funny noise that corresponds with massive electromagnetic interference.
She shot back.
We don't know what's causing it. We don't know what else is down here. We're acting like explorers, but we're just trespassing. These carvings, they're getting darker.
I hadn't wanted to admit it, but she was right. The newer carvings, the ones deeper in the caves, had a different tone. The serene scenes of cultivation and community were replaced with images of fear. The slender figures were shown fleeing, looking back in terror at something that was never fully depicted, just a swirling chaos, a vortex of shadow. Ben stood between us, his face pale. He looked from her worried face to my determined one, torn between caution and the adventure of a lifetime. She wanted to turn back. I saw it as cowardice then, a failure of nerve. But now I wonder if she was the only sane one among us. What would you have done in my place? Push forward for the discovery of a lifetime, or listen to reason and retreat? Let me know in the comments. I convinced them to push on for one more week. My obsession had completely taken over. I had to know what was at the end of these tunnels. I had to find their city. And we did. Beyond a final, narrow chasm that we had to cross with a tension line, we found it. We stepped out into a cavern so immense it made the glow garden look like a closet. Before us, stretching into the gloom, was a city. A real city. Towers of polished obsidian spiraled up towards the unseen ceiling, connected by delicate, web-like bridges. Buildings carved from massive crystals pulsed with a soft, internal light, illuminating plazas and avenues. Waterfalls of bioluminescent algae cascaded down walls into canals of flowing water. It was breathtaking. A silent, beautiful, majestic metropolis. We named it Aethelberg, the noble fortress. For a moment, all the fear and tension vanished, replaced by pure, unadulterated wonder. We had done it. It was real. We stood on a precipice, looking out over a lost world, and for a glorious hour we were gods. But the silence of the city was what began to break us. It was perfectly preserved. There were no signs of struggle, no collapsed buildings, no bodies. It was just empty, utterly, profoundly empty. It was as if every single inhabitant had simply stood up and walked away at the same moment. The feeling of being trespassers intensified 1,000-fold. This wasn't a ruin, it was a home. We were walking through someone's empty house, and the owners could be back any minute. The humming was stronger here, a constant low thrum that vibrated through the soles of our boots. We found what looked like a central library, or hall of records, its walls covered in the most intricate carvings yet. And here we found the answer to where the Chthonians had gone. The story was horrifying. They hadn't just vanished, they had been running. The carvings depicted a great cataclysm. Not an earthquake or a volcano, but something they had awoken. In their endless quest for knowledge and energy, they had dug too deep. They had breached a barrier into another, even deeper part of the world, a place the carvings called the Core Silence. And something had followed them out. The entity was never shown clearly, only as a formless, all-consuming darkness, a crawling silence that devoured light and sound. The final panels were a desperate, terrifying chronicle. They showed the Chthonians sealing the great tunnels behind them, creating massive rockfalls, trying to contain the thing they had unleashed. And the very last carving, etched by a clearly trembling hand, showed them beginning a desperate exodus, not deeper, but up, towards the surface, towards our world. They weren't a lost civilization that had died out. They were refugees, fleeing a horror from below. And we had just spent weeks systematically breaking through every single one of their ancient seals. The realization hit me like a physical blow. This wasn't a discovery. It was a desecration. We hadn't opened a tomb. We had unlocked a prison cell. That's when the tremor hit. It wasn't like an earthquake. It was rhythmic, heavy, a colossal footstep. The humming intensified into a deafening roar that shook the very air. The lights on our gear flickered and died, one by one. The glowing crystals of the city began to dim, as if something was draining their energy. We were plunged into a terrifying twilight, lit only by the faint, dying algae.
Aris, what's happening?
Ben screamed, his voice thin with terror. Another tremor hit, stronger this time. I saw a crack race up one of the obsidian towers. Dust and rock began to rain down from the ceiling.
"We have to go, now!"
Lena yelled, already grabbing Ben and pulling him towards the chasm we'd crossed. We ran. We scrambled back through the empty streets of Ethelberg, the city literally coming down around us. The rhythmic booming was getting closer, louder. It wasn't just in the rock anymore, it was behind us. We reached the chasm. I got across first, turning to help Lena, who was pushing a terrified Ben ahead of her. He was halfway across the line when the biggest tremor yet struck. The entire ledge he was launching from sheared away, plummeting into the abyss below. The line snapped taut, then went slack. I heard a scream, a sharp, piercing cry that was abruptly cut off.
Ben!
Lena shrieked, her voice raw with disbelief and horror. She was clinging to the edge of the chasm, which was now twice as wide as before. She was trapped. I was on one side, she was on the other, and below us was nothing but darkness and the sound of Ben's echoing scream. And then the booming stopped. The silence that followed was worse than the noise. The air grew cold, heavy. The last of the city's light winked out, leaving only our headlamps. Lena was trying to find a new anchor point, her face a mask of frantic determination.
Aris, help me find a way across.
She yelled. But I wasn't looking at her, I was looking at the darkness behind her. Because it wasn't empty anymore. My lungs were burning, my mind was screaming. If you've ever felt true, paralyzing fear, you know that feeling. And if you're finding this story as gripping as it was terrifying to live, consider subscribing. You'll help me get more stories like this out there. From the blackness of the city, a shadow began to detach itself from the other shadows. It was wrong. It didn't have a shape. It was a patch of absolute blackness, an amorphous void that seemed to drink the light from my headlamp. It flowed like oil, silent and vast, pouring out from between the buildings. The humming was coming from it, a sound that felt like it was unwriting reality. It wasn't a creature of flesh and blood. It was a living absence. The crawling silence. Primal, unthinking terror took hold of me. Every instinct, every cell in my body screamed one word.
Run.
I saw Lena look back over her shoulder. I saw her eyes widen in a way I will never, ever forget. She opened her mouth to scream my name, but the sound was swallowed by the hum. The thing, the void, surged towards her. I didn't think. I didn't weigh my options. I abandoned her. I turned and ran, leaving her to face that thing alone. I grabbed the only piece of proof I could reach, a small, star-shaped tablet from the Hall of Records that I'd tucked into my pack, and I fled. I can still hear her voice in my nightmares, shouting my name, drowned out by a sound like grinding consonants and wet, tearing fabric. I don't know how I made it out. I ran for what felt like days, on pure adrenaline and terror. I scrambled up ropes, clawed my way through tunnels, not daring to look back. I didn't sleep. I didn't eat. I just moved, driven by the memory of that formless shadow and Lena's final look of horrified betrayal. I eventually collapsed at one of our lower base camps, where a supply team found me days later, delirious, dehydrated, and babbling about a city of light and a living darkness. I was the sole survivor. The official story was quickly constructed. A freak seismic event. A tragic loss. The Kárstova Abyss was deemed
Geologically unstable.
And the entrance was permanently sealed with thousands of tons of concrete and explosives. For
Public safety.
They said. For my own safety, I think. I was debriefed, of course. I told them the truth. I showed them the star tablet. They listened patiently, then had me see a psychiatrist. My story was dismissed as the ravings of a trauma-addled mind. The tablet was a
Curious geological formation.
My photos and data logs from deep within the cave were conveniently corrupted and lost during the
Rescue.
I lost my tenure. I lost my funding. I lost my reputation. I became the madman who got his friends killed chasing a fantasy. And so here I am. I live a quiet life now. I check my locks 3 times before I go to bed. I can't stand being in a completely dark or silent room. Sometimes, in the dead of night, when the world is still, I think I can hear it. That low, deep hum, vibrating up through the foundations of my house. A faint echo from the heart of the world. They sealed the entrance, but the Chthonians sealed dozens of tunnels, and it didn't stop it. It only delayed it. I don't know what I awoke down there, but I know it's still waiting. I know it's aware of us now. The story of the Chthonians wasn't a myth. It was a warning I was too arrogant to heed. Did I do the right thing by running? Should I have tried to save them, only to die with them and leave the world ignorant of the danger? Have you ever had an experience so unbelievable that no one would ever take you seriously? I live with that question every single day. I've told my story. Now you know the truth that sleeps beneath your feet. Share your thoughts or theories.